He had just finished a long, grueling day at the training facility. Every muscle in his body ached and his mind was drained, yet he felt a sense of accomplishment. He had pushed himself harder than ever, preparing for missions he knew could one day put his life at risk. He climbed into his car, the cool night air brushing against his face as he drove toward home. The streets were mostly empty, quiet except for the occasional hum of traffic lights or the distant wail of a siren. He was tired, but there was a sense of calm in the familiar routine of the drive. Out of nowhere, flashing red and blue lights appeared behind him. He recognized the signal immediately, a police vehicle pulling him over. His pulse quickened, not from fear of being stopped, but from a deep understanding of how situations like this could spiral quickly. He carefully pulled over to the side of the road, keeping both hands visible on the steering wheel. The car came to a gentle stop, tires crunching over the gravel, and he exhaled slowly, trying to steady his racing thoughts. The officers approached cautiously, their footsteps crunching on the asphalt. He could see the tension in their body language, their hands hovering near their holsters. He remained calm, speaking in a steady voice as he greeted them. He knew any sudden movement could be misinterpreted. His training kicked in, but he kept it invisible, just a man complying with a traffic stop. "Good evening, sir." "License and registration, please," one of the officers said. His voice was firm but carried an edge, a mix of authority and suspicion. He handed over the documents carefully, ensuring every gesture was deliberate, non-threatening. The night felt heavier, the tension thick, as if the air itself was waiting to see what would happen next. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then, a sudden movement inside the car caused the officer to tense. Perhaps it was the seatbelt being adjusted or a hand brushing against the door. Either way, the officer interpreted it as a threat. His hand went to his firearm, and in a split second a shot rang out, shattering the stillness of the night. The SEAL flinched but did not panic. He immediately assessed the situation with the calm precision of someone trained to survive life-or-death moments. He knew he was in danger. Every instinct told him to protect himself, but he also knew that acting recklessly could make things worse. He moved carefully, keeping his own weapon ready, not to shoot blindly, but to neutralize the threat if it came closer. The officers, startled by his readiness, hesitated. In those few seconds, the street became a dangerous chessboard, with each movement weighted heavily. Civilians in nearby buildings peered through their windows, some frightened, some frozen in disbelief. The sound of sirens grew louder, but the SEAL's focus never wavered. He could see the fear and uncertainty in the officer's eyes, and he understood that this was a human reaction, not just a professional one. Both sides were acting on instincts shaped by experiences, biases, and the weight of responsibility. He spoke calmly, his voice carrying authority and reassurance. "I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm not here to hurt anyone. Please lower your weapon and we can talk." His words seemed to pierce the tension, a bridge between two sides poised for conflict. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, one officer lowered his gun slightly, while the other kept a wary eye on him. The night stretched long as the situation balanced on a knife's edge. The SEAL's training told him to move slowly, to communicate clearly, to never let fear dictate action. He could feel adrenaline coursing through him, but he controlled it, using it to sharpen his senses instead of clouding them. The officers finally began to understand that this was not an ordinary encounter. His calmness, his demeanor, the way he held himself, all spoke of someone who had faced danger countless times and had survived. As the tension eased just a little, he began explaining his actions, the reason his hands moved, why he reached for his seatbelt the way he did. Every word was measured, honest, and human. He did not accuse, he did not demand. He simply conveyed truth, relying on the power of clarity and composure. The officers listened, their initial suspicion slowly giving way to comprehension. In that moment, the SEAL realized something profound. It was not just his training that had kept him safe, but the ability to remain human under pressure. Fear was natural, but courage was about managing it, about understanding that everyone involved was acting with the best information they had at the moment. He could feel the eyes of the nearby residents, some recording on their phones, others just watching silently. He knew this encounter would leave a mark, not just on him but on those who witnessed it. Minutes felt like hours as the standoff continued. Every sound, every movement was amplified in the quiet of the night. He kept his voice calm, repeating that he posed no threat, hoping that the officers would fully grasp the truth. Slowly, the situation began to diffuse. One officer stepped back, nodding subtly to the other. The SEAL lowered his hands slightly, signaling trust without abandoning caution. Finally, the officers holstered their weapons. Relief washed over him, but he did not relax completely. He knew that the danger had not vanished entirely. The night could still hold surprises. But in that moment, a fragile understanding had been reached. They had seen him as he truly was, a trained professional, a human being, and someone capable of both defense and reason. As he started to gather his documents and prepare to leave, he reflected on the fragility of life, the power of calmness, and the importance of perception. One wrong move could have changed everything, yet careful thought, clear communication, and controlled action had prevented a tragedy. The night remained tense, but hope flickered in small, meaningful ways. He drove away slowly, still aware of his surroundings, but also carrying a sense of accomplishment. Not from physical training, not from military skill, but from navigating a dangerous human encounter with composure and integrity. He knew that this experience would stay with him, shaping his understanding of trust, perception, and survival in a world where assumptions could be deadly. The streetlights passed over him as he drove, each one a reminder of how close he had come to disaster, and yet he also knew that his actions, his restraint, and his humanity had made all the difference. Tonight was not about victory or defeat. It was about survival, understanding, and the thin line that separates fear from courage. He reached home, heart still racing, but spirit calm. The door closed behind him, shutting out the night, but not the lessons it had brought. He would carry them, share them, and remember that courage was not just in combat, but in every moment where life demanded presence, clarity, and heart. The calm of the night shattered in an instant when the first shot rang out. It was sudden, loud, and terrifying. The SEAL's heart leaped and instinct immediately took over. Years of training surged through him. He knew that every second now could determine life or death. He stayed low in the driver's seat, assessing the officer's movements and the environment around him. Adrenaline coursed through his veins, sharpening every sense. The world had become painfully slow, yet every decision had to be perfect, precise, and quick. The officers' faces were tense, eyes wide with fear and confusion. They had expected compliance, a simple stop for a minor violation. Instead, they were caught in a situation they did not fully understand. The SEAL realized that this misunderstanding could escalate in the blink of an eye. He could see the fear and hesitation in their posture, but he also recognized danger. His life was now at risk. He had to act. He reached for his own weapon, moving carefully, deliberately. Every muscle was controlled. Every movement was calculated. He did not act recklessly, nor did he panic. He simply positioned himself to defend his life while minimizing the risk of unnecessary harm. His military experience had taught him that control and calmness often saved lives more than raw aggression ever could. The street around them was now alive with chaos. The sound of gunfire echoed off nearby buildings, startling residents and drawing attention. Neighbors peeked through windows or stepped onto their porches, unsure whether to flee or stay hidden. The SEAL could feel their eyes on him, but he blocked the distraction. His focus was on survival, on protecting himself, and on trying to de-escalate a situation that had already gone too far. He could see that the officers were shaken, unsure whether to advance or retreat. The SEAL's mind raced, evaluating every possible outcome. He knew that a wrong decision by anyone here could result in tragedy. He remembered the countless hours of Navy SEAL training, not just in shooting or combat, but in reading people, predicting actions, and controlling the uncontrollable. Every lesson he had learned was now crucial, not for a battlefield overseas, but on a quiet city street in the middle of the night. "Stop! Stop!" one officer shouted, voice trembling. "Don't move!" The SEAL froze for a second, hands raised slightly, showing he was aware and not reckless. His voice remained calm, firm, and steady. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm a Navy SEAL. Please, let's handle this safely." He hoped his words would reach them, that clarity could cut through fear and tension. For a moment, there was hesitation. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching longer than it should. The SEAL noticed small signs. The officer's finger placement, slight shifts in stance, their breathing. He understood their fear, just as they misunderstood his movements. Both sides were acting on instinct, yet instinct alone could no longer guide them safely. Precision and awareness were necessary. Suddenly, the air was pierced by another shot. This time it came from an officer who had misjudged the SEAL's movement. A car horn blared in the distance, and the echoes made it feel as if the entire neighborhood had frozen in place. The SEAL's heart raced, but his mind stayed sharp. He returned fire, not wildly but carefully, aimed to neutralize the immediate threat. He moved his body behind the car door for cover, crouching low while keeping his eyes on the officers. Every motion was deliberate. He did not panic. He calculated. He knew that any wrong movement could escalate the situation further. The officers, meanwhile, were reassessing their actions, realizing they had engaged with someone far more trained than they had anticipated. Fear was visible in their eyes, but so was confusion. No one expected this level of skill in a civilian encounter. The civilians nearby were terrified, some taking cover behind fences or cars, others calling emergency numbers in a panic. The SEAL remained aware of their presence, doing everything possible to avoid harming innocent bystanders. This was not just about defending himself. It was about preventing a tragedy in a community that had suddenly become a battlefield. Minutes passed like hours. The sound of sirens grew closer as additional police units approached, unaware of the full situation. The SEAL realized he had to maintain calm even as fear and chaos swirled around him. He spoke again, his voice steady, authoritative, and human. "I am not a threat. I will not hurt anyone if we can handle this peacefully. Please lower your weapons." Gradually, the tension began to shift. One officer, still shaking, slowly lowered his firearm. The other hesitated, watching the SEAL's every movement. The SEAL kept his hands visible, showing that he was committed to de-escalation. Every word he spoke was measured, designed to communicate truth without inflaming fear. He could feel the weight of the situation, the responsibility of being a trained professional in the midst of untrained panic. He knew that his actions could either save lives or make the night a disaster. His military background gave him skill, but it was his understanding of human nature that guided him now. He spoke with patience, emphasizing cooperation over confrontation. Finally, after tense minutes, both officers lowered their weapons completely. The SEAL did not immediately relax. He knew that danger could return if the situation was mishandled. But there was a subtle shift, an unspoken acknowledgement that the encounter had moved past immediate threat. The officers recognized his composure, his clarity, and his experience. As he remained behind the car, he noticed the small details, the trembling hands of the officers, the distant wail of sirens, the fear etched on neighbors' faces. It was a moment that would be remembered, not for heroics or violence, but for the fragile balance between fear and reason. The SEAL had survived because of training, calmness, and the ability to read people. But it was also a story about humanity under pressure, how fear could push people to act impulsively, and how courage could guide them back. The SEAL continued speaking, offering reassurance, explaining why he moved the way he did, and making it clear that his actions were defensive. Every word was carefully chosen, every gesture deliberate. Slowly, the officers began to understand the truth. This was not a criminal confrontation, but a dangerous misunderstanding. Civilians nearby whispered to each other, some still frozen in fear, some capturing the moment on phones. The SEAL remained aware of them, keeping movements controlled, ensuring that no one else would be harmed. His focus never wavered. Survival was still the priority. Finally, one officer gestured for the others to stand down, signaling that the immediate danger had passed. Relief was visible on everyone's faces, yet tension lingered in the air. The SEAL knew that the night had tested not only his skills but his patience, his empathy, and his ability to communicate under extreme pressure. As he slowly lowered himself from cover, he reflected on what had just happened. The first shots had been terrifying, but the way he responded, calm, controlled, human, had prevented a larger tragedy. It was not about being stronger or faster. It was about being present, aware, and intentional. He understood that moments like these were not just about survival, but about understanding the human elements that could turn fear into violence or peace. The sirens grew louder, signaling reinforcements, but the SEAL had already begun guiding the situation toward resolution. His words and actions created a fragile bridge between officers and himself, between fear and understanding, between potential disaster and safety. For the first time since the encounter began, he allowed a small sense of relief to wash over him, even as he prepared for what might come next. The investigation, the questions, the scrutiny. He knew he had acted correctly. He had defended his life, maintained composure, and ensured that others were not harmed. The night had tested him in ways that training alone could not predict, but he had passed. He had survived, and he had done so with humanity intact. He stayed alert, but the immediate danger had passed. The officers, still shaken, began to call for backup and medical attention. The SEAL remained calm, cooperative, and ready to answer questions truthfully. He understood that the situation was far from over, but the first and most critical challenge, survival in the face of misunderstanding, had been met successfully. The smoke from the gunfire had barely begun to settle when the realization hit the officers. They had been dealing with someone far beyond their expectations. The SEAL, still calm and composed, had handled the entire encounter with precision and control. It was clear now that he was not just an ordinary driver caught in a routine traffic stop. There was experience, discipline, and a level of awareness that was unmistakable. One officer, still visibly shaken, took a step back and finally asked the question that had been burning in the air. Who are you?" The SEAL exhaled slowly and spoke in a measured, calm tone. "I am a Navy SEAL. I serve my country, and I've been trained to respond in high-pressure situations. I mean no harm to anyone here." The words seemed to ripple through the tense atmosphere like a wave. The other officer's eyes widened, recognition dawning slowly but unmistakably. Suddenly, the fear that had dominated the encounter shifted to disbelief, then to a mix of respect and confusion. They were dealing with someone whose life experiences were worlds apart from their own. Neighbors peered from windows, some whispering to each other, still shocked at what had just unfolded. Cell phones captured shaky footage, and the small community began to realize that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The SEAL, aware of the attention but remaining focused, knew that every word, every movement mattered. His life was safe for now, but the situation could still escalate if it was misunderstood. He lowered his hands slightly, showing that he was cooperative, not a threat. The officers mirrored his movements slowly, hesitancy still in their steps. One of them finally said, We didn't know. We thought you were." The SEAL held up a hand, stopping the sentence. "I understand," he said. "This could have ended badly for all of us. But now that we know who we are dealing with, let's make sure we handle it safely." There was a pause, a moment of silence, heavy with reflection. The officers exchanged glances, the tension between them slowly easing. They began to see the situation in a new light, not as a confrontation with a criminal, but as a near-tragic misunderstanding with someone highly trained, disciplined, and fully capable of defending himself. He spoke again, calmly and clearly, explaining his movements, his actions, and why he had responded as he did. "When I moved, it was not to attack," he said. "It was to protect myself. I was assessing the threat and responding to danger. That is what my training teaches me. I am not your enemy." The officers listened intently, their earlier fear giving way to comprehension. They realized that their own assumptions and snap judgments had brought them dangerously close to disaster. The SEAL's calm, authoritative explanation helped bridge the gap between their fear and understanding. He did not raise his voice. He did not intimidate. He simply conveyed the truth with clarity and confidence. As the first signs of dawn began to creep into the sky, the tension on the street began to shift. The SEAL's presence, his words, and his demeanor transformed the encounter from a dangerous standoff into a controlled situation. Civilians slowly emerged from their hiding places, relieved that no one had been seriously hurt. Yet the memory of gunfire and fear lingered in their minds. The officers began to call for additional support, not as a reaction to threat, but to ensure that the situation was documented and handled according to protocol. They knew that this incident would be scrutinized, and they wanted to make sure the truth was clear. The SEAL cooperated fully, providing identification, credentials, and verification of his military status. A sense of awe began to settle over the scene. People whispered among themselves, realizing that they had witnessed a Navy SEAL in action during a life-threatening encounter on their quiet street. The contrast between his professionalism and the chaos of the situation was striking. His discipline had prevented what could have been a devastating tragedy. Even as the officers verified his identity, the SEAL remained aware of his surroundings. He understood that public perception and media attention could turn a private ordeal into a public spectacle. He maintained composure, careful not to escalate any tension further. His actions were guided by logic, experience, and a deep understanding of human behavior under stress. The officers involved in the initial shooting began to reflect on their own actions. They realized how quickly fear and assumptions could cloud judgment. The SEAL's calm and reasoned responses forced them to confront the reality of their mistakes, while also recognizing the professionalism and humanity in him. Neighbors, now cautiously emerging from behind curtains and doors, began to discuss the event in hushed tones. Many were amazed that a trained Navy SEAL had been caught in such a dangerous misunderstanding, and even more amazed that the outcome had been controlled without further injury. Children clung to their parents, sensing the lingering tension and the seriousness of what had occurred. Meanwhile, the SEAL explained that his life experiences had taught him more than just combat skills. They had taught him awareness, patience, and the importance of reading situations carefully. He shared that in high-pressure scenarios, decisions must be made quickly, but with thought, clarity, and humanity. "If we lose our composure," he said softly, "then no one wins." The officers absorbed his words. They could see the truth in his actions and hear it in his calm, authoritative voice. The realization of the near-tragic consequences weighed heavily on them, but they also recognized the opportunity to learn from this encounter. Their initial fear had been human, but the SEAL's response had turned it into a teaching moment. The SEAL did not dwell on anger, resentment, or fear. He understood that the officers' actions were not born of malice, but of misunderstanding and reaction to perceived danger. He kept his tone measured and empathetic, ensuring that the situation remained under control. His ability to maintain composure was not just a skill, but a reflection of his character. As the investigation began on site, the SEAL cooperated fully, recounting the events step by step. He explained his movements, his reasoning, and his mindset during each critical moment. The officers took notes, and even the arriving backup units were impressed by his clarity and professionalism. He had turned a potentially deadly encounter into a controlled narrative of survival, understanding, and communication. The dawn light cast long shadows over the street, illuminating the faces of those involved. Relief, exhaustion, and reflection were visible in every expression. The SEAL finally allowed himself a small moment of relaxation, though he remained vigilant. The encounter had tested him, pushed him to his limits, and reminded him of the thin line between life and death. He knew that the story of this night would not end here. There would be investigations, reports, and media attention, but he also knew that he had acted correctly, with discipline, restraint, and humanity. The officers, now fully aware of his identity and training, approached him with a mix of respect and regret. They understood that they had been lucky to encounter someone who could manage the situation so expertly. Neighbors began to recount the events in their own words, some amazed by the SEAL's calmness, others stunned by the intensity of the confrontation. The SEAL stayed grounded, aware that public perception could easily distort the reality of the situation. His focus remained on truth, clarity, and ensuring that no further harm would come to anyone. Finally, the first official steps of the investigation began. The SEAL provided all necessary identification, credentials, and explanations. The officers involved were asked to recount their actions and decisions. Every detail was documented. It was clear that this encounter would become a case study, not just for law enforcement, but for understanding human behavior, fear, and professionalism under pressure. By mid-morning, the tension on the street had mostly dissipated. Residents returned to their routines, though the memory of the night remained vivid. The SEAL reflected on what had happened, the close brush with danger, and the lessons learned. He realized that training, discipline, and composure were essential, but so too were empathy, communication, and understanding the humanity in every person, even in the midst of fear. This experience left a lasting impression, not just on him, but on everyone who witnessed it. It was a stark reminder that life could change in an instant, and that courage, clarity, and calmness could prevent disaster. The SEAL had survived, but more than that, he had shown that even in the most intense situations, humanity could prevail. As he prepared to leave the scene, he knew that the story of this encounter would spread. He also knew that his actions had turned what could have been a tragedy into a powerful lesson in awareness, composure, and survival. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to breathe, grateful that he had remained human, calm and in control throughout the ordeal. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different. The streets were quiet, but the tension from the night before lingered in the air. News of the shooting and the Navy SEALs' involvement had already begun to spread. People whispered to each other, replaying the events in their minds, astonished that a simple traffic stop could have escalated into such a dangerous encounter. Some were amazed at how the situation had been handled, while others were still shaken by the sound of gunfire and the fear they had witnessed. Meanwhile, the SEAL cooperated fully with investigators. Officers and city officials arrived on the scene to document every detail. They examined the vehicles, the surrounding area, and even collected witness statements from neighbors. Throughout the process, the SEAL remained calm and composed, answering questions carefully and truthfully. He understood the importance of transparency, knowing that every detail could be scrutinized later by authorities, the media, and the public. The investigation revealed several key factors that had contributed to the dangerous escalation. Miscommunication, fear, and snap judgments had all played a role. The officers involved admitted that they had overreacted to perceived threats, while the SEAL's training and composure had prevented the encounter from ending in tragedy. The contrast between the chaos and his professionalism was stark. As the SEAL recounted the events step by step, he emphasized how critical calm and clear thinking had been. In situations like this, he explained, one wrong move can be the difference between life and death. I rely on training, yes, but also on patience and understanding. We have to see each other as humans first, not just as roles or stereotypes. The officers listened intently. Some visibly shook their heads, acknowledging the lessons they had learned the hard way. They understood that the SEAL's presence had been a wake-up call about how quickly fear and assumptions could escalate situations. At the same time, there was a sense of relief that no one had been seriously harmed. News crews began arriving as word of the event spread. Cameras captured the scene, neighbors gave interviews, and the story quickly reached the public. People across the city were talking about what had happened, some praising the SEAL's courage, others questioning the actions of the officers. Social media buzzed with posts, videos, and debates, turning the encounter into a public discussion about safety, training, and racial dynamics. The SEAL stayed out of the limelight initially, choosing instead to cooperate fully with authorities. He provided evidence of his military background, his training, and his actions during the incident. Officials verified his credentials and acknowledged that his response had been measured, skillful, and appropriate under the circumstances. While the media coverage was unavoidable, he remained focused on truth and clarity, avoiding sensationalism. Community leaders and civil rights advocates also became involved, emphasizing the lessons of the encounter. They discussed the importance of de-escalation training for law enforcement, racial awareness, and the need to prevent similar incidents in the future. The SEAL's story became a point of discussion not only about courage but also about systemic issues, responsibility and accountability. Meanwhile, the officers involved faced internal reviews and disciplinary procedures. They were required to attend retraining sessions focusing on traffic stop protocol, bias awareness, and communication skills. While the process was difficult for them, it was an opportunity to learn and grow from the experience. The SEAL emphasized that his intention was not punishment, but understanding and improvement. Throughout this period, the SEAL reflected on the incident. He realized that survival in such moments was not just about physical skill or quick reflexes. It was about understanding human behavior, reading situations carefully, and using communication to de-escalate danger. He thought about how fear can cloud judgment, how assumptions can lead to dangerous outcomes, and how courage often means remaining calm when everyone else is panicking. Neighbors who had witnessed the event shared their own experiences. Many admitted they had never imagined something like this happening in their quiet neighborhood. Some spoke about the sound of gunfire and the fear they felt, while others expressed admiration for the SEAL's composure under pressure. Children who had been frightened the night before began to process the event, guided by parents who emphasized safety and understanding rather than fear. The SEAL also considered the broader implications of the encounter. He recognized that many civilians and even trained professionals could react in ways that unintentionally escalate situations. His story became an example of how training, awareness, and human understanding can prevent tragedy. It highlighted the delicate balance between fear and reason, and the importance of acting responsibly in moments of high tension. Legal experts reviewed the situation carefully. They noted that the SEAL's actions were entirely justified, and that the officer's initial response had been influenced by fear and misunderstanding rather than intent to harm. The case became a reference point for law enforcement training, showing how proper communication and restraint can save lives. The media coverage continued, but the SEAL remained grounded. He wanted the focus to be on the lessons learned, not sensational headlines. Interviews emphasized responsibility, awareness, and humanity. His calm, measured demeanor contrasted with the chaos of the night, reinforcing the idea that composure and clear thinking can turn dangerous encounters into opportunities for understanding. Community discussions led to policy reviews. Police departments began examining their traffic stop procedures, focusing on de-escalation and cultural awareness. The SEAL's experience became part of training modules, demonstrating how fear and assumption can lead to mistakes, and how professionalism and calm can prevent harm. As weeks passed, the SEAL returned to his normal life, though the impact of the event lingered. He continued to share his experiences in controlled settings, speaking to military personnel, law enforcement trainees, and community groups. His story was a reminder that even in ordinary moments, extraordinary challenges can arise, and that preparedness, calmness, and humanity are the best tools for survival. Neighbors eventually settled back into their routines, but the event remained a topic of conversation. People spoke of the night when a Navy SEAL faced a life-threatening misunderstanding, and how composure, training, and communication had prevented a tragedy. The incident became a shared memory, a cautionary tale, and a story of resilience and humanity. For the officers involved, the experience was life-changing. They recognized the importance of controlling fear, checking assumptions, and learning from mistakes. The SEAL's presence had been a test, not of aggression, but of their ability to respond responsibly under pressure. The lessons stayed with them long after the incident, shaping future decisions and interactions. Through it all, the SEAL reflected on the thin line that separates danger from safety, fear from courage, and chaos from understanding. He understood that training could save lives, but so could patience, empathy, and clarity. The night had tested him in ways that went beyond physical skill, demanding emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and a deep understanding of human nature. By the time the investigation concluded, it was clear that the SEAL had acted appropriately and professionally. The officers had learned important lessons, and the community had witnessed a powerful example of courage and humanity under pressure. The story became a reminder that even in moments of fear, individuals can act with discipline, empathy, and reason. In the end, the SEAL's life returned to a sense of normalcy. Yet the experience remained with him, shaping his understanding of both danger and humanity. He continued to train, to serve, and to teach others the importance of composure, communication, and awareness. The night of the traffic stop had been harrowing, but it had also been a demonstration of the power of discipline, courage, and the human spirit. After the investigation and media coverage, life slowly returned to a quieter rhythm, but the impact of that night lingered for everyone involved. The SEAL returned home feeling a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and reflection. He had survived a situation that could have ended in tragedy, but he also knew that the lessons from that night would stay with him forever. It was not just about the danger he had faced. It was about understanding human nature, fear, and the importance of calm, deliberate action in moments of extreme pressure. The officers involved in the traffic stop underwent extensive review and retraining. They reflected deeply on their decisions, acknowledging how fear and assumptions had escalated the encounter. While the process was challenging, it was necessary for growth. They began to understand that the SEAL's professionalism and composure were not a result of luck, but of experience, discipline, and a deep awareness of human behavior. Many officers admitted they had never witnessed someone handle a life-threatening situation with such calm and clarity. The SEAL himself took time to process the events. He thought about the neighbors who had witnessed the standoff, the civilians who had been frightened, and the officers who had been acting out of fear. He understood that blame was not the solution. Learning and reflection were. He spoke openly about the experience to trusted friends and colleagues, emphasizing the importance of patience, awareness, and humanity in all interactions. Community members continued to discuss the event, and it became a focal point for conversations about safety, policing, and human behavior under pressure. Some shared that they had never considered how quickly ordinary situations could escalate, while others expressed gratitude that someone trained and capable had been present to prevent disaster. The SEAL's calm and composed actions had saved lives, and people recognized the value of skill, awareness, and restraint. The SEAL also began sharing his story with broader audiences, not for recognition, but to educate. He spoke to law enforcement trainees about the importance of de-escalation, clear communication, and situational awareness. He emphasized that even the most routine situations could become dangerous, and that human understanding and empathy were as vital as any physical skill. His story became a teaching tool, a real-life example of how courage, clarity, and calm can prevent unnecessary tragedy. Media coverage portrayed the SEAL as both a hero and a survivor. His experience was widely discussed, highlighting the complex realities of racial dynamics, public safety, and military training in civilian life. The story sparked debates about policy, accountability, and best practices in law enforcement, leading to discussions in city council meetings, training sessions, and community forums. People were learning from the night's events, and the SEAL's actions became an important part of that dialogue. Despite the public attention, the SEAL remained grounded. He focused on the lessons learned rather than the fame or recognition. He understood that the encounter had tested not only his skill but his character. Remaining calm, deliberate, and empathetic under extreme pressure was the true measure of success. He reflected on how fear can cloud judgment, and how training, discipline, and human understanding can turn potentially deadly situations into controlled outcomes. Over time, policy changes began to take shape. Police departments reviewed their traffic stop procedures, emphasizing de-escalation, cultural awareness, and clear communication. Officers were trained to recognize the difference between real threats and perceived threats, to avoid snap judgments, and to approach every encounter with caution and humanity. The SEAL's experience became a case study in how proper training and awareness can save lives, not just for officers but for civilians as well. The SEAL also took time for personal reflection. He considered how fragile life could be and how quickly circumstances could change. He thought about the trust placed in him that night, trust that his actions would prevent harm, not escalate it. He felt a renewed commitment to his own values, to discipline, and to using his skills responsibly. The experience reminded him that courage was not just about facing physical danger, but about maintaining clarity, empathy, and humanity under pressure. Neighbors and community members gradually returned to their routines, but the memory of that night remained vivid. They spoke about it in quiet conversations, often remarking on the SEAL's composure and skill. Some admitted they had feared for everyone's lives, while others reflected on the lessons about fear, communication, and understanding human behavior. The story of the Navy SEAL became a shared experience in the community, a reminder of how quickly ordinary moments could become extraordinary tests of character and courage. The officers involved also carried the experience with them. They had faced a situation that challenged their assumptions and tested their training. They learned that fear could lead to mistakes, but reflection, accountability, and retraining could turn mistakes into valuable lessons. The SEAL's professionalism had been a mirror for their own behavior, demonstrating how control, awareness, and human understanding could prevent tragedy. In the weeks and months that followed, the SEAL continued his work, both professionally and personally. He trained with discipline, but he also began mentoring others, sharing the lessons he had learned about life, danger, and human behavior. He spoke about the importance of maintaining calm in stressful situations, and about seeing people as human beings first, rather than through the lens of fear or assumption. His experiences became a source of guidance and inspiration for those around him. Even with all the attention, the SEAL never sought recognition. He saw the incident as a lesson, a moment that highlighted both danger and the power of human composure. He focused on helping others learn from it, ensuring that future encounters, whether in law enforcement, civilian life, or military contexts, could be safer and more aware. As time passed, the SEAL reflected on the night and the lessons it had taught him. He realized that courage was not just about strength or training. It was about clarity, empathy, and understanding human nature. He understood that life could change in an instant, and that each decision, each word, and each action mattered. The night of the traffic stop had tested him like nothing else, but he had emerged not only alive, but with insights that would guide him for the rest of his life. Ultimately, the story of that night became more than just an event. It became a lesson in human behavior, fear, and resilience. The SEAL's actions saved lives, taught important lessons, and demonstrated the power of discipline, patience, and calm under pressure. It was a story of survival, but also of understanding, the recognition that even in moments of chaos, humanity, composure, and awareness can prevail. The SEAL carried these lessons forward, using them to shape his life and the lives of others. He knew that every encounter, no matter how ordinary it seemed, had the potential to test courage, empathy, and judgment. And he knew that by remaining calm, clear-headed, and humane, it was possible to turn fear into understanding and potential tragedy into lessons that could save lives. Even as the years passed, the memory of that night stayed with him. It was a reminder of the delicate balance between danger and safety, fear and courage, chaos and control. The Navy SEAL had survived, but more importantly, he had acted with clarity, integrity, and humanity. And in doing so, he had left a lasting impact, not just on the officers, the community, and the media, but on the way people would think about fear, responsibility, and the power of calm in the face of danger. In the end, the SEAL returned to his daily life, carrying both the weight and the wisdom of the experience. He continued to serve, train, and mentor, guided by the knowledge that courage is measured not only in action, but in understanding, empathy, and the ability to remain human in the most extreme circumstances. The night of the traffic stop would never be forgotten, but it became a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of calm, clarity, and courage.